I overheard my wife tell her lawyer, "Once I frame him in court, I'll take the kids, the house, and everything else." I didn't argue. I quietly secured my finances, canceled every shared payment I was legally able to stop, and walked away. What she did next was so outrageous it became the talk of the entire town. Hello Reddit I plus here. My name is Grant Mercer. I'm 38 years old, and until 8 months ago, I thought I had a pretty normal life. I owned a small cybersecurity consulting firm in a quiet coastal city. My wife Rebecca was 35. We'd been married for 11 years and had 2 children together, ages 9 and 7. If you'd asked me back then whether my marriage was solid, I would have said absolutely. Turns out I was living inside a carefully constructed lie. It started on a Thursday night. I was finishing some remote diagnostics on a commercial security network my company had installed. As part of testing, I logged into the monitoring app connected to the smart system in our own house. The audio feature was incredibly sensitive. Mostly it was useful for testing microphone ranges. That night, it ruined my life. I heard Rebecca talking in the study. At first, I wasn't paying attention. Then I heard another voice through speakerphone. A man, and then Rebecca laughed. "He's never going to see it coming." I froze. The man asked something I couldn't quite make out. She replied, "By the time this gets to court, he'll look unstable. The attorney says documentation is everything." My stomach dropped. I turned the volume higher. The man chuckled. "What about the kids?" Rebecca answered immediately. "I'll get full custody. Once the judge sees what we're preparing, Grant won't stand a chance." I couldn't breathe. The conversation continued for nearly 20 minutes. What I learned that night changed everything. The man wasn't just her coworker, he was her boyfriend. They'd been together for over a year. Worse, they were working with her attorney to paint me as an abusive and controlling husband. They were collecting edited screenshots, recording arguments out of context, and intentionally provoking fights. The goal wasn't divorce. The goal was destruction. The house, the business, the savings, the children, everything. I spent the entire night reviewing months of footage stored in the system. The more I watched, the worse it got. Rebecca had been staging incidents whenever I wasn't home. She would send herself fake messages from anonymous accounts. She'd photograph random bruises and tell friends I'd caused them. She even coached the kids to repeat certain phrases if anyone ever asked questions. I felt sick. For the first time in my life, I genuinely didn't know what to do. So I called the one person I trusted completely, my older sister. She listened quietly for almost an hour. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Stop reacting emotionally. Start thinking strategically." The next morning, I hired the most aggressive family law attorney in the state. I didn't tell Rebecca. I didn't confront her. I didn't even change my routine. Instead, I collected evidence. Every recording, every text, every email, every financial transaction. For 6 weeks, I documented everything. What I discovered was unbelievable. Rebecca and her boyfriend had already started spending money they assumed they'd get after the divorce. Luxury vacations, furniture orders, reservations for a beachfront condo. They were planning their future with my assets. Then I found the biggest surprise. They'd secretly taken out loans using forged information connected to our shared finances. My attorney's face turned pale when he reviewed the documents. "She just committed financial fraud," he said, several times. That was the moment everything changed. When Rebecca finally filed for divorce, she arrived with a dramatic story. She claimed I was controlling, dangerous, emotionally abusive. She demanded sole custody. She demanded the house. She demanded 60% of my business. She even requested temporary support payments. Friends started choosing sides. Some believed her immediately. Others stopped answering my calls. I stayed silent. My attorney told me to let her talk. So I did. For 3 months, she told everyone who would listen that she was escaping a monster. Then came the preliminary hearing. Rebecca walked into court looking confident. Her boyfriend sat in the gallery smiling. Her attorney presented a thick stack of documents, witness statements, photos, printed messages. The judge reviewed everything carefully. Then my attorney stood. He handed over a single flash drive. The courtroom became very quiet. The recordings began playing, one after another. Rebecca discussing the plan, Rebecca coaching witnesses, Rebecca laughing about taking everything, Rebecca admitting she'd manufacture evidence, Rebecca discussing fake allegations with her boyfriend. The expression on her face changed from confidence to panic. Her attorney looked horrified. The judge stopped the proceedings twice just to verify what he was hearing. Then things got worse. My attorney introduced the financial records, the forged documents, the hidden debts, the fraudulent transfers. By the end of the hearing, even Rebecca's attorney was asking for a recess. The judge wasn't impressed. Over the following weeks, the entire case collapsed around her. Her custody claims disappeared. The fraud investigation expanded. Several former friends who had publicly supported her suddenly distanced themselves. Even her boyfriend vanished. Apparently, he wasn't interested in sticking around once there were legal consequences involved. But that wasn't the part that shocked our town. The shocking part happened afterward. Rebecca held a huge community fundraiser claiming she was a victim of an unfair legal system. Hundreds of people showed up. Local business owners donated, community leaders attended. She planned to tell her side of the story one final time. Unfortunately for her, someone leaked the court exhibits. Not me, not my attorney. To this day, I don't know who did it. Minutes before Rebecca took the stage, dozens of attendees received copies of the recordings and financial documents. Phones lit up across the room. People started listening, whispers spread. Then the whispers became arguments. Sponsors began leaving. Donors demanded refunds. Several people walked out before she even reached the microphone. One board member publicly resigned from an organization she served on. Another attendee stood up and asked if the recordings were real. Rebecca tried denying everything. Then someone played one of the audio clips over a speaker. The room went silent. Within 10 minutes, the fundraiser was effectively over. Within 20 minutes, it was all over social media. The story spread across town faster than anyone expected. The woman who had spent months portraying herself as the victim was suddenly exposed as the architect of the entire scheme. Today, 8 months later, life looks very different. I have primary custody of my children. My business survived. The house was sold and the proceeds were handled according to the court's final ruling. Most importantly, my kids are doing well. As for Rebecca, she's living in another city now. We communicate only through a parenting app. Sometimes people ask if I hate her. Honestly, I don't. Hatred requires energy. What I feel is something closer to disbelief, because if someone had told me years ago that the person I trusted most would spend months planning my downfall, I would have laughed. Instead, I learned a painful lesson. The most dangerous enemies aren't always strangers. Sometimes they're the people sitting across from you at the dinner table, smiling, while they quietly sharpen the knife. The story didn't end there. In fact, the part that still keeps me awake at night happened 6 months after the divorce was finalized. By then, life had finally started settling down. The kids were adjusting. My business was growing again. For the first time in nearly 2 years, I felt like I could breathe. Then I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. Almost. "Mr. Mercer?" a nervous female voice asked. "Yes. My name is Evelyn. You don't know me, but I think you need to hear something." The moment she mentioned Rebecca's name, my stomach tightened. Evelyn explained that she had recently started working at a property management company in another state. A few weeks earlier, Rebecca had applied for a leasing position there. During the hiring process, she'd become friendly with several employees and had shared pieces of her past. At first, nobody thought much of it. Then Rebecca started bragging. Apparently, she liked telling people how she had almost won everything from her ex-husband. One afternoon, she'd had a little too much to drink at a company gathering. That's when she started talking. According to Evelyn, Rebecca openly admitted that the custody allegations had been fake from the beginning. She laughed about manipulating friends. She laughed about lying to therapists. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. I would have gotten away with it if Tyler hadn't been stupid enough to put things in writing. Evelyn had recognized my name because she'd seen articles about the court case online. The conversation bothered her enough that she tracked down my contact information. I thanked her and hung up. For several minutes, I just sat there staring at my desk. I thought the nightmare was over. Apparently, Rebecca still viewed everything as some kind of game she had lost. A week later, another surprise arrived. This time it came from my attorney. He called sounding unusually excited. "Remember those fraudulent loans?" Unfortunately, they finally finished the investigation. And there was a brief pause. "Several criminal charges are being filed." I nearly dropped the phone. For over a year, investigators had been digging through financial records. What they discovered was even bigger than we'd realized. Rebecca hadn't only forged documents connected to our marriage, she had apparently done similar things with previous employers: expense fraud, unauthorized reimbursements, false accounting entries. Small amounts at first, then larger ones, enough to attract attention, enough to become a serious problem. The criminal case moved quickly, much faster than the divorce had. When the news broke locally, people were stunned. Many of the same individuals who had attacked me publicly during the divorce suddenly became very quiet. A few even reached out to apologize. One former friend showed up at my office. He stood there awkwardly, holding a coffee. "I owe you an apology." I remembered how he'd called me a monster online, how he'd encouraged others to boycott my company. I accepted the coffee, but the friendship never recovered. Some things don't. Then came the biggest twist of all. About 3 months before Rebecca's sentencing hearing, my daughter asked if she could talk to me privately. She was 10 by then, old enough to understand more than I realized. "Dad? Yeah?" She looked nervous. "Mom told me something a long time ago." I immediately felt concerned. "Wow, what was it?" My daughter looked down at the floor. She told me if I said certain things about you, we'd get to stay in the big house and she'd buy me whatever I wanted. I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. Children shouldn't have to carry burdens like that. I pulled her into a hug, and for the first time since the divorce, I cried. Not because of Rebecca, not because of the lies, but because I finally understood how much damage all of this had done to the people who mattered most. The kids. No court ruling can erase that, no settlement can fix it. You just try to help them heal. One day at a time. A month later, Rebecca appeared in court for sentencing. The woman who had once walked into family court smiling confidently looked completely different. The judge reviewed years of misconduct, financial fraud, forgery, false statements, violations discovered during the investigation. When it was over, the sentence wasn't as severe as some people expected, but it was enough to permanently alter her future. Professional licenses disappeared. Employment opportunities vanished. Trust evaporated. The courtroom emptied quietly afterward. No dramatic speeches, no shouting, no final confrontation. Just consequences. As I walked toward the parking lot, I heard someone call my name. I turned around. Rebecca stood several feet away. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she asked the question I'd never expected to hear. Do you think the kids will ever forgive me? I looked at her. Really looked at her. The anger I'd carried for years was gone. All that remained was sadness. I don't know, I said honestly. But that's something you'll have to earn. She nodded. Then she started crying. Not the dramatic tears I'd seen in court. Not the tears she'd used for sympathy, real tears. For the first time, she seemed to understand what she'd actually destroyed. Not the marriage, not the money, not the house. The trust. And once trust is broken badly enough, it can take a lifetime to rebuild. I got into my truck and drove home. When I walked through the front door, my son ran over holding a science project he'd been working on. My daughter was arguing with the dog over a tennis ball. The house was loud, messy, normal. And after everything we'd survived, normal felt like the greatest victory of all.